Hello, everyone. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Noah.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Raising the New Earth podcast. Today, we are joined by our guest, Dr. Erinne Branter. She is a veterinarian. She's very passionate about animals and consciousness and her patients. She also loves the outdoors. She lives an eco-conscious life in British Columbia and Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And she's joining us today. Welcome to the podcast, Erinne.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
It's always a very hard question. I am Canadian. I was born here. I was born into a family with a very strong matriarch. I have two sisters. I've always wanted to be a veterinarian, so it wasn't really a choice. It was kind of a calling, which I feel blessed about. I know how challenging it is to find our place in this world. I'm a mother of two children who are currently 8 and 10. We speak French in the home predominantly. I specialize in veterinary medicine into internal medicine and then to minimally invasive surgeries, which was very stimulating for me for a long time. In recent years, I've had a lot of loss and death that were acute and quite traumatic. And so it led me to seek, I was always a bit of a seeker, but it led me to seek other places that made sense for me. And one of those places was constellation work. And it's not the family constellation work in the sense of an individual's constellation. It's actually constellation work in a greater setting of all of your ancestors and everything around you. And so it's not the therapeutic counseling that people associate constellation work with. It's an embodied somatic practice. So that's a pretty big part of my life. I'm middle-aged, exactly, probably, to be truthful. And that's leading me to reevaluate how I want to spend the rest of my life, and both career-wise, how I want to show up, and where I want to place my energies. So I guess that's me in a nutshell, currently in my state of being.
Beautiful. Brooke, do you have questions?
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as the constellation work, I know we had Louisa on, yes. And I know that I believe you introduced Noah to her. Is that you were saying that it's not the individual, but the ancestral level? Is that the same sort of process that she uses, or is this something different? Or can you just talk a little more on your experience there? Because I know our audience probably, if they've listened to all the episodes, are a little bit familiar with that work, but would love to hear your angle.
Great. Yeah, I mean, if they've already been introduced, which is beautiful, is that a lot of the language around family constellation work is associated with the therapeutic practice, which is a one-on-one, and it's finding the exiled pieces of oneself. And how we do that, this is a very different process in which it is simply, it's based in an African base with Hellinger. It's just a very different practice. So I assume that she explained all of that and went through the bits and pieces where this came from. It's just for me to delineate the two, because when I say family constellations, people think it's therapeutic work in that sense, but it's not.
I see.
Yeah, because she mentioned that it started from the Holocaust, right? In Germany, from the Holocaust to heal Holocaust families and Nazis families.
Yeah, and you know, I just actually went up to a remote community in British Columbia. So we have quite a strong Indigenous population here that has suffered an enormous amount with colonization. And we are able and blessed to work in a community, a very small one that's kind of invite only, and they've lived there forever. I mean, not forever, on that same river. And to constellate work there where the spirit essentially is embedded in every one of the individuals that live there is a pretty powerful thing to be a part of. So I just came back from that last night.
Wow.
So I guess for me, it's all the same. For me, how I show up in my relationship, how I show up as a veterinarian, I show up as a sister, as a mother, is all related to my constellation, my life, my set of circumstances that led me here, the things that I hold that are not mine. And so when I speak of it being bigger than oneself, I truly believe that, especially in white displaced culture, we don't really know where we're from anymore. And that leaves us really untethered. And so when big things happen and many of us don't have strong community around us, or a strong foundation of like, I'm from here and that there's my aunties and my uncles and I can know where I'm from because the stories are there, where do we turn? And then especially if we've been embedded in religions that don't suit us anymore, there's a lack of belonging. And for me, what this reminds me is that we actually all belong here in our own way, in different ways, in different fashions. And the constellation work allows me to remember that as a white displaced person. And it allows me to evaluate what happens in my life without judgment. I've had to represent perpetrators. I did it this weekend. A strong sexual perpetrator. And what came through was that this person had nowhere to put their pain. Where else in the world do you get that, where you have to walk without judgment and you feel embodied that person's experience? I just don't know where else you get that. So for me, it's a widening of my lens. We live very zoomed in on our own experience and me. And it just pulls you back from that place and allows this widening of observation that behind all of our actions is so much history. And when you can walk through your life and observe that, it's very powerful. It takes the fear away, to be perfectly honest. My son the other day said, Mom, I'm having this somatic experience of kind of being stabbed sometimes. And before constellation work, that would have scared me a lot. I wouldn't have known what to do with that. And I thought, that's really interesting. Does it feel like it's you? And he said, oh, actually not really. And I said, we have a lot of ancestors. Maybe something happened that we need to look at. Would you be willing to have me constellate it? And he said, yeah, I need you to ask me for permission first, but that would feel really good. So I just immediately went, I had no fear. I sat calmly in this place where even a year and a half ago, I'd have been like, oh my God, what do I do? My kid thinks he's being stabbed. And I would have gone into this like mental place of fear. And I didn't. I just thought, oh, maybe it's not yours. Let's talk about it. Let's constellate it. And he was like, okay. So it affects all my pieces, right?
Are there tools that you say, okay, if a child feels a certain way, and yes, you can get into a fear mode. Obviously, we are the protectors of the child as mothers and fathers. But are there ways that one can do it with their child without going through a constellation training?
Absolutely. It's so simple. Like it's returning to the body. And so you could do what's called a myself and the other. It's so simple. You could even place a piece of paper as the thing and just take a few deep breaths and say, okay, well, that's the feeling of being stabbed. And I'm you, and you stand in for your daughter or son, and you somatically feel where that comes from. And you may feel like it's something behind you. and it takes 3 minutes. Usually it's 3 movements, and you somatically explain what happens, and it just something makes sense to both parties that are involved. And those are really simple tools to manage big things. You know, we go through a lot in this society with not a lot of support. As simple as, you know, do I do that job that I've been asked to do? Do I do that thing? You know, my partner and I constellate things all the time that are coming up for us. And we flip it so that I could be him in his somatic experience and he can be in mine. And it doesn't take very long. It's just a simple emptying of the mind and standing in the body and ignoring this piece and moving directly into the body. And the information is always there, and opening this portal that if you need help and support, it's actually right there. We just forgot how to tap into it.
Can meditation do the same? Because what you're describing is pretty much saying stillness. And I'm feeling, if we're, like we talked about it before the podcast, Brooke and I, if you're tapping into your parasympathetic nervous system and you're downloading the theta brainwave, your intuition, your creativity, can you get answers like that? In your opinion?
Probably. It feels different. You know, I do both. And so it feels different. It, you know, meditation is real still. Like in some representations, you're pulled to like flip backwards. Very physical process. It's very embodied. And in meditation, I've engaged in a little bit of my ancestry, but it that feels different. It's a different practice, I think.
Got it.
And maybe other people have very different feelings around it. But for me, when I walk into the space and say, I'm constellating this, I'm like, it's like I'm being dragged into another place, which I live in a fair bit. So when I found constellation work, I thought this feeling I always have of like kind of knowing where someone's coming from or feeling that person's feeling, there was a name to it. It's different than meditation for me personally.
So would you say that it's the intention of it that is the most powerful piece in like allowing it to come? Or I guess that's kind of where I still am a little unclear, and why I would love to, you know, be a part of a session, even as just a, you know, someone who is the, I'm forgetting the term, but the one that isn't actually having the questions and the, but
yeah, I mean, even as a representative,
you know,
yeah, as a rep, you know, it's like, we can communicate about this, but we could even do one together online, one-on-one. Like I can walk you through it. It's so simple. And essentially we call it the knowing field. So there's this field around us that actually knows everything we need to know. And in order to be a good representative or a good facilitator, when you're facilitating group facilitations, is to empty all of your preconceived ideas and to allow all of this stuff to come through. And it's always surprising. You know, I was in a representative the other day and I'm like, my hand is clenched and I feel a lot of tension around the backs of this. That's all I felt. I knew nothing about what I was representing. And I was representing someone's daughter who had a heroin addiction.
Oh, wow.
It's every single time it's like that.
Yeah.
Every time. So there's a place around us that's just asking us to empty out a little bit to bring information in. And it is phenomenological. It's not an explained thing. It's not like if you do 5 steps, you'll get here. It's not. And we love that in this society. 5 steps to thinness, 6 steps to weight loss, this many hours to fasting. And we just love it. We just love we
do it. We just started doing it.
Yeah. You know? And we joke to ourselves about it too, because we're like, please don't make this another to-do list for yourself when we give you the tips like this.
And then
like
when we don't
tap into yourself.
Yeah. And then when we don't get the results, or we do get the results, what do we do with it? That's the question. What are we doing with all of these steps of betterment? When in my opinion, it's all there anyway. And I'm not saying that a healthy body doesn't allow you to step in. I don't think I could do this work if I was coming in hungover or I was coming in unwell. My body has to be a pretty clean vessel to work in this situation with effectiveness, because you can't be in your story. And this is it. We love our stories. We just love them. They're so familiar. And we can, he said, she said, to the end of the days, and we can put our feelings in. And this work just strips it bare. It's the great humbler. It just pulls it all apart and says, no, there's no judgment here. There's all we're trying to do is create flow to love. That's it. Because there's so much love in this world, and all of these stories block it. And where it gets blocked are steps. It's that easy. Is there equal give and take between two people or two situations? There's the sense of belonging. We would do anything to belong. Anything. People murdered other people to belong, right?
People drink to belong.
People drink to belong. People harm other people. They hurt we hurt ourselves to belong to our families sometimes. Like, for you to belong to a family that's a family that drinks and hunts, you better drink and hunt. Even if you kind of know it's not what you want to do. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying you'll belong to that. And to not belong is very hurtful. And it blocks love when we don't belong. And you know, and the other part is order. If you look at where love gets blocked in relationship, it's order. So belonging, these are the tenets to constellation work. Belonging, order, who came first, right? If you marry in with a person and that person may have another partner, you have to respect that that partner came first and did the groundwork for you to come second. And that person deserves respect, and your elders deserve respect, and your older sister deserves respect, or brother, and your grandparents deserve respect. And you stay in your place. And when you come out of your place in order, we watch this with parentification with kids now. Excuse my language, but shit's disrupted. And the whole system feels unwell because the order is out of order. And when we're out of order and where we stand, things get messy until we stand back and look at them and attempt to reorder them. The parents, the parent, the kids, the kid. I'm the youngest in my family. Sometimes I don't act like it, and it messes everything up because I'm like, I'm going to control everything. I need to be the little sister. And when I'm not the little sister, my family's disordered. And it stops the flow of love between us.
So we have
And
belongings in order. I wanted to go through the other.
And equal give and take. So that can be energetic. It can be financial. It can be whatever it is that we engage in. And it's not transactional. It's a different equal give and take. And the only place that equal give and take does not stand is parent to child. Because you will give to them until they leave the planet. And the hope is that then they do the same to theirs, or to a purpose that they have in the world. It doesn't have to be a child. Everything else should have a sense of that equal. You guys have been in a relationship. You know when it's not equal. It doesn't flow. Right? So there's real basics to how we live. And we can mess them up in our heads. But this work just strips it bare. And when you're in the field, it shows you things you never thought would ever come through. And yet when they're there, they're so clear, they're so true, and they change everything around you. They just do. You'll be in the field and we hear this all the time. I did this piece of work on my father, or I represented for someone else's father, and my dad hasn't talked to me in 6 years and called me. I mean, this happens all the time. All the time. It's this ripple effect. It's like you've thrown a pebble into the water by looking, and everything around it's like just creates some place for the exiled pieces of us that we don't want to look at. And sometimes in families, that's lies, secrets, and cover-ups. You know, and they're going to come out. We got to pay the piper. And this work allows it to be seen so that our kids don't have to carry all that stuff. Right. Or less.
On that note, just curious with, because you have children and are so engaged in the work, do you feel that you see results in them as part of you, getting into your family and releasing or, unblocking things? Like, I'm just curious if you've witnessed anything.
It's a really great question. Yeah. I mean, the short answer is,
yeah.
Right. And the long answer is example one. I did some work around my mom and myself, and I've done lots of pieces of work. And every time I do it, my relationships soften. So I'm softening my family relationships. There's a pattern my mom set up with her sisters. We're all patterned, right? Just repeating patterns. I'm noticing that coming out in my sisters and I did a constellation, and I came home and my daughter was repeating the same pattern with my sister's kid, her daughter. And I thought, holy crap. So what it allows me to do is not take it so damn personally. I'm just running a pattern. I don't have to keep doing it, but it allows me to back up enough to see it. And just by seeing it, I can voice it and say, maybe the way you're interacting with your cousin isn't actually yours. You don't have to do it. There's another way. Instead of, it's because she said this, then you said that. I just back up and I'm like, it's not. You're actually just playing out what Katie and I played, and you don't have to. Or just, I don't tell her she doesn't have to. I just say, maybe this isn't yours. And everyone takes a deep sigh and they're like, oh, because it's kind of true. Instead of being like, what's wrong with me? Why am I behaving like this? Or why am I doing this? Asking, where did it come from? It was a great book. It didn't start with you.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who wrote that, but I just read it. I can write it. I can send it to you, Noah, but we are playing patterns. And until we take the empty place in ourselves and start recognizing them, we're going to keep doing it, and they'll keep doing it behind us. So the strong answer is doing this work for me, I feel like, is changing things. We have a huge pattern of early death in my family. And I'm like, where's all this coming from? And I'm starting to see where this is coming from. And it feels less like a fate I have to hand down.
It seems as though like it's just as when just in like spiritual work and you start to realize that your thoughts are not yours and you can bring that awareness in. It's the same thing on a deeper level with like these deeper patterns like physical ailments or things that just seemingly are not our fault. Like, why does this stuff keep happening to me? It's like that. Deeper.
What is this fate? What is this fate our family has, that all the males die early in awful situations? It's like, I have a son, I got to look at this stuff. This isn't, this is what we call a fractile. Or Angwin St. Just, which was she was a trauma worker who was Bert Hellinger's he was her mentor. And she did a lot of trauma work. So she went into like prisons and like the whole thing with this, right? Because we're just repeating patterns. And if you go into a prison, I guarantee you they're all just repeating patterns that were handed to them. And there's fractiles, like that place in the road where accidents keep happening, but it's not actually a dangerous place in the road. Like you see that, you're like, why are there always flowers up this pole? It's like just in the middle of a road, and it's not scarier than any other place in the road. There's like these portals of issues, And until someone sits and is like, what happened here? Really? And gives justice to that thing that's been waiting to be looked at. Because there's doorbells. And I don't know if you guys feel that, but I certainly feel that there's things in my life that kind of ring my doorbell. Do you want to look at this? And I'm kind of like, I'm not ready. Or I don't notice it until it rings harder and louder. And then I have to look at this thing that's happening. That could be a coldness in me that I don't understand that pops up. That can be a bit of anger. I'm like, where's this coming from? And it keeps ringing my doorbell where it's uncomfortable enough for me to look at. And when I constellate it, there's always something really big behind it. And the word that comes to me when I think about that is freedom. I have freedom to not blame myself for everything that's happening, but to look inside and outside at something greater than me that's holding me, that's asking me to look. And when I get to be involved in these constellations like we did this week in these remote communities that are both warriors and strong, they've had so much taken away, and you get to stand in a place of someone who's done harm and or had harm done to them, that's embodied walking in someone's shoes. And what comes out is never what you think. The perpetrator doesn't know what to do. The victim sometimes isn't that much of a victim. It's so interesting. And this is how we work in all of our systems. And it's just such a beautiful place to land, to know that there's a place that is able to hold this and to clarify some of these things for us in an embodied way. Get out of our heads. It's not where the answers are. It's not. And for those of us with a fast computer, I can get a job. I can be a specialist. I can do surgery. You know, Noa's the same. I know her. She's like, tack, get her done. I got it. You're probably the same. You're doing a podcast. So there's this like, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know, you're not sitting this, you know, you're raising your kids. You're trying to do something that creates difference in the world. You're trying to look at something different. We're very good doers. And this asks us to shelf that for a minute and to feel. Which, to be honest, as women, we're really good at. And we can't forget that piece of us, because that's kind of our superpower. And men are amazing at this work too. I'm not saying men aren't, they are, right? And more of them are coming to this work and doing their own healing. It's beautiful. Right?
Can we segue into you being the amazing veterinarian that you are? And for those that don't know, Erinne was in LA. She was heading an amazing department, went back to her hometown and opened her own clinic. And I know you started with your staff, you started the morning with your staff with some sort of a Tai Chi practice. So tell us more about this conscious business model that you exemplified so beautifully.
Yeah, it's not always. And it was interesting. I wrote something today that I need to do that more.
Mm-hmm.
But we've also started with emotional shares. And
tell us more about it.
We do human rounds. And then we do hospital rounds. And what we started doing, and I learned this through constellation work, is in order for us to build trust wherever we are, whether it's in the family, whether it's with your love partner, or whatever it is, we need to know where someone's coming in with that day. So I hand my little rock around at work before rounds. And trust me, this was really uncomfortable for a long time. And it's still uncomfortable for a lot of people. And I'm like, 2 sentences, what do you come in with? And it goes around. And the whole hospital feels different. Because I know that she lost her mother now. Right? I know she didn't sleep last night. I know she's pumped to be here today. She can hold a little bit of that energy today. I know her back's sore. Right, whatever, or his, whatever this is, right? Like, I know what you're coming into this space that I now have to work a 14-hour shift with you, doing this all with a lot of emotion. And if I know where you're coming from, then I can better hold space for you. And you're not like, why is he not on? Why is he not helping me today? Right? Why is she acting kind of like just cold and bitchy? Because 90% of the time, it's not about us. We love it to be about us because we're super ego, but it's not. And those rounds have changed everything. And when I feel like the hospital isn't feeling well, then we do 8 to 10 minutes of Qigong. And even if someone laughs through it, they're moving and they're laughing, right? And in my department in particular, our rounds have gotten so deep. Just kind of magic. It's taken a year to get there, but our conflicts are resolved so quickly. I use a lot of Brene Brown stuff as well around trust, around her braving. When we have a conflict at work, I pull out the braving and I say, where did we fall apart? Because where the conflict usually comes is a lack of trust in one another and ourselves. And to identify where we all played a part in it is so interesting, because oftentimes everyone's doing this to that person. And then when we look at it, we all realize we all played our part. Maybe a little bullying, maybe a little not understanding, maybe a little bit of not checking in. Maybe you actually came in really hurt and couldn't voice it. And it allows us over time to come to those places in minutes. Whereas that stuff, those interpersonal things, HR, used to take days of my time. It was the worst. I was like, am I seriously dealing with high school kids? And I wasn't. I was dealing with a place that people didn't know how to communicate properly, and they didn't feel safe in it. It was all trust issues. So that culture is really hard. It's hard to build, and it's hard to build in a society that loves to point fingers at others because they caused this in me. And it's an interesting place to be in a profession that has the highest suicide rate of any other profession right now. And say, how do I maintain my own okay? And what is my responsibility as a leader with these people? Because if I do what my people did to me, and I'm losing my colleagues to suicide, then I'm creating the same shit that I landed in. Right? And I would argue that's exactly the same with our kids. If we want a different world, then we have to change how we're doing it right now. And it's scary because I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, do you guys? Like, maybe you feel more strong about where this is going, but I think that we're in a real crisis, and how we're raising our kids is like, are we going to save this place or not?
Yeah. Well, that's really powerful what you did, but also in regards to our children, I feel you, and I know it is too. And I think that was at least part of, or at least a piece of starting this podcast, is recognizing that in order to raise kids that we want to see change the world, we have to first see and do that within ourselves. Because how could we ever expect our children to, when we're not in that place in our own self and in our own life? If we're not healing ourselves, if we're not becoming conscious of different energies and, feeling that empathy for others, understanding where they're coming from, why would we expect our children to be able to do that? So I think that that's a huge piece of why we like to have these conversations, is we can begin awakening in ourselves that piece of us in all of these different aspects and ways, and
and it's scary, and it's lonely sometimes. And I feel like maybe every generation felt this way, but I feel like there's no laid out path anymore, unless you want to follow what's out there, but that led to this. So no, right? Like we can keep living in these material places, but our kids we need spirit. We need spirit. It, like, if we can destroy the land that we live in, of course we want to hurt ourselves with drugs, alcohol, shopping, whatever the hell we're addicted to that week, right?
Right.
And so and there's no roadmap for me. Okay, you know, I love having these conversations. I loved being with Noah there. Like we've always had this really deep connection of like, how do we do this? How do we integrate all the beauty from our past, let go of what doesn't serve us, and how do we raise these incredible spirits in bodies to be in a place that's burning, quite literally burning under their feet? We're not in a place where we have a lot of time to mess around, right? We're handing a fireball to them and being like, have fun with that.
Yeah.
And if we're, you know, I do a lot of leadership training in the hospital. And when your leaders are at a 10 and they're like this, the team's at a 200. Like, I don't know why my team's such a mess. And it's the same as a mother. You know, you see mothers coming like, I don't know, everyone's stressed out. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You're a freak right now. Like, you need to calm her down and do some work. And I've been there. I'm like, I feel that way sometimes too, where I'm like, how's your kids? I'm like, how am I? That's how my kids are.
Mm-hmm.
My kids are, how am I? That's it. If I'm okay, they're okay. If I'm not okay, they're not okay.
Yeah. And we had a conversation with the postpartum doula, Rafi Dobles, a few episodes ago. So for those of you that haven't listened, go back to that. She talks exactly about that, how dysregulated parents or mothers will, you know, bring about and raise dysregulated kids. And so the first person we have to check in with is ourselves, and be humble and take the blame if needed, and watch our behavior, because they're going to model, they're going to bathe in the frequency that we transmit to them. And so we have to always go back to the source.
Yeah. And then that's, you know, we joke about animals, but like it's so, I find it clear with everyone, we're just kind of animals anyway. So we're doing the same thing with a little bit more mind ball associated with it. But our energetics are their energetics. And I think when I move into my little shame as a parent and whatever that is, I think I don't want to hand this down to her. I think, well, how can I nourish myself so that I'm showing up in a way that's where I want to be? And, you know, that's taken me a long time. And I hope that tomorrow I look back and learn something, and in a week I look back and think, oh, I'm a little better than I was then. That's a good thing. You know?
Absolutely. Can you talk more about the animals taking on their owner's energy in your hundreds and hundreds of cases that you've seen,
Mm-hmm.
and also the connection, if there is a correlation or connection between diseases of owners and animals?
Yeah, I don't think I'm a pattern observer, which I think that in medicine you have to be to some degree. And I come from like a lineage of intuitives. So I also see big patterns. I always have, which is a lot of information. This is going to segue a bit, but I think that's why I used alcohol in the past, to turn the dial down. I get a lot of information from the world, and that's it's a lot to hold sometimes without having a community to tell me how to do that. I was like, it's a lot when you have an intuitive person in your house, you don't know how to manage it. And so I'm learning that. But what I've always noticed is that we're transmitting all the time, you know, just all the time. And when I have patients that come in like on repeat, every time someone says, this might sound weird, but, and I'm like, what? Bring it, because that's the information that I want. My dad had the same cancer as my dog, and my dog used to sit by him. That's weird. I have that same really weird thing, and no one's figured it out in me either. Pain eating, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that dog doesn't get pain eating. Like, I know which breeds get what, you know? And when it's out of sort, I always ask what's going on in the home. And I mean, it's not 100%, but it's pretty close. Again, when I started doing constellation work, I thought, holy crap, we're creating fractals here. We're creating illness fractals that our animals are picking up on. For sure. And I'm not saying that there's not, like in humans, there's not genetics. And I'm not saying there's not epigenetics. And I'm not saying, and I'm not saying that there isn't environmental factors to illness, because I know enough to know that it's not just this. But when things come up that are outliers, I know that there's energy in there. And there's a really good book Gabor Mate has written about, like, when the body keeps the score. And if you're around deep, hard emotions, Mommy, all the time, Mommy, it makes you sick.
Mommy. All right.
So I think that emotions around us that are unmanaged create illness. I don't think that. I know that. I actually know that. And I also know that that transmits to our animals, because there are these beings that they're just pulling in all our energies, and they want to heal us so badly, and they want to move what's happening through us so much that they take it on. And sometimes they don't have anywhere to put it. But I think it's a fractile, and I think it just keeps showing up until someone's willing to look at the root cause, which is often an unaddressed thing. You know, if there's a history to things like MS, right? If there's an actual emotional state associated with people that get chronic fatigue or myofascial stuff, none of those people have not had trauma. None of them.
Right.
And so for us to be like, we're treating this thing in the body that's chronic fatigue, it's not chronic fatigue. It's chronically unaddressed stuff from the past. And that book delineates it, what I always felt, perfectly. And I would argue to bring that into the veterinary world, it's the exact same thing. It's just that they're pulling it from their humans. And they're trying so hard to move that energy, but they're just animals. And they're sitting in it all day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's the same thing we do.
I love that, and I'll be looking forward to your book, Erinne.
I know.
I'll be buying that book. Come on.
I know, it's got to come.
Mm-hmm. Got to come.
Yeah, another project. That's the beauty of middle age. What do I want to do now, right? So exciting.
Brooke, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the law of one and densities of consciousness that you mentioned?
Yeah, when Noah was telling me that, a little bit of your background and being a veterinarian, the thing that I was like, that came to mind, and I don't know if you're familiar at all with the law of one. Have you heard of that text? It's a channeled text, but and it's interesting because I don't know a lot about it, but what I find myself drawn to is the things that I have heard about it. Like, it relates very much to like the chakra system and even different just things I've learned from yoga, and even just like religions from like a broader sense. It, like the parts that kind of are worth holding on to, it reinforces that. But one of the things that I know I've heard from the law of one is like that there's different densities of consciousness, and essentially we are in third density consciousness, meaning that we have an ego, and so we know that we're separate. Of course, then the fourth density of that is understanding that we're actually all connected, that everything is connected. But the lower densities of those, there's first density, which would be like a rock or just kind of a standing object. And then there's second density consciousness, which most animals are in. However, it's also been, I don't know if specifically through the text, but just through this frame of reference, that dogs actually and other pets can start to take on a third density consciousness where they actually start to develop an ego. and see themselves as an identity. So I just find it, interesting. And I feel like it does tie into the work that you're speaking of, and just the animals kind of taking on, the energies that they are surrounded with, and how that may be different than how an animal, even in the wild, isn't exposed to that sort of energies and, consciousness level, I guess. So I was just, any thoughts there? Or does that kind of make sense in any way to you?
Oh my God, there's so many thoughts. So many thoughts. I mean, when I sit with animals, that delineation is very vague to me, because I've watched animals mourn deeply, like deeply mourn. And I've watched them connect in ways that are phenomenological always. And I've watched horses move energy through people that really needed it, and I could see it. And that person came in, like myself included, with heartbreak and anxiety, and the horses just, and they do this thing where they move their heads and they move their feet and they move your energy because you're not well enough to do it. So for me, I don't know if that means that there's an ego, meaning that I know that I exist as a being. Most animals that I interact with, I feel, do. That's down to birds. Like, I live with ravens and I watch them play and they talk to me, which sounds crazy, but they do. They've been eating my chicken eggs for like 2 weeks, and I finally stopped them, and they've been upset with me for quite some time. I had a woodpecker. I cut one tree down in this whole place to put a greenhouse, and he attacked my house for 2 weeks on my bedroom, which he's never done before. So those things might sound funny, but even wildlife has an amazing amount of intellect.
Yeah.
I mean, parrots have this hierarchy. Wolves are like deeply complex. Horse packs, if you sit and you take any time to watch it, there's ego there. There's order. There's flow. There's give and take. Like, animals do this. And I don't think it's arguing or not arguing, but for me to feel like an animal doesn't have a sense of their own self, is counterintuitive to my experience with them.
Yeah.
I think they're really capable of high level emotion, personally.
Yeah. I mean, with you saying all of that, I can certainly be witness to that in things that I've seen of, just different videos of wildlife, and I agree with you and see that. I think though, and I don't know how that would play into this density of consciousness, but I think that animals have this level. I mean, well, you see it like with birds and like geese that fly in a V formation, like they're clearly aware of every other bird and where their position is. And I know that that's been explained with, like, they're giving off frequencies and vibrations. And so in a sense, I think that animals are much more in tune with the energies around them, and being able to pick up on that. And I think that like with you saying that I feel like, and I can see that from you being just very like conscious of energies and understanding them, that you can communicate with animals. And I know some people can do that much better than others, but I also think it comes down to just how sensitive of a person you are with energy work and being able to sense that. So
yeah, I don't know. And it's so interesting. And this again is like, we're so heady. We just love to put things in boxes.
Well, yeah, so true.
We just love it. Like, do animals have an ego? Do they not? Like, does it matter? I don't know if it matters. And I don't know if one person's experience with a tree can be incredibly intimate. We talk about relationship. We talk about relationship to others. We talk about relationship to ourselves. We talk about relationships to your dog, to your animal, to a river. I mean, people have relationships with environments, right? I'm about to do a 2-day constellation workshop on nature constellations, like constellating what the land might want from us instead of what do I get to take? So we're in constant relationship. And like you said, some people are more sensitive to that relationship with the rock. And some people are more sensitive to that relationship with a human being. And with one human being over another. I mean, you know that, I know that. There's someone that I don't feel relating with is easy. And there's trees in my yard that I'm deeply in relationship with, and others that I kind of ignore, funnily enough. I don't know why that is. Some people are like, my spirit animal is X. You know, we have these relationships all the time with energies, whether you're sensitive or not, they're there.
Yeah.
Our current state of being is so fast and loud that there's just no time to even feel it. And if you do feel it, people laugh at you. And when I get to go into communities where these things are a given, I'm reading a book called Feather Medicine. And it's about the knowing that people have. And I would argue we all have. And I feel in my soul that it's present in everybody. And I feel like the way to control us is to take that away. Because when we stop listening to ourselves and how we relate to our environments, it deeply affects how we relate to others. It deeply relates to how we live, how much we want to take or taking society. And this is how we're controlled. Phones, jobs, go. As a woman, you've got to do all this stuff. And then we're attacking each other as women. We're attacking our own bodies as women. You know, men are doing the same in their own way. And until we just stop and say, it's time to turn the knobs down, slow down, and understand that we're in constant relationship with everything around us, that's actually where all the answers are. It's actually pretty simple. But we're basically being yelled at all the time, I think. And it's for us to, you know, I'm blocking my ears to say that doesn't get to come in. And I need to create space for that boredom and that quiet and that stillness so that I can see the big things that are actually running the show, that are creating all of the conflict, that are creating all of the dis-ease, because that creates disease in my mind.
Yeah, and I know that, Brooke, you agree with that. Dr. Zach Bush, whom we did Coach's Journey of Intrinsic Health, talks a lot about it, actually, you know, bringing us back to source, nature, the amazing infrastructure and the healing capabilities that nature awaits for us to experience. And also Dr. Catherine Clinton, who was on our podcast, talked about we are so disconnected from the source, which is the root cause of all the diseases and the illnesses that she sees. And as a doctor going to medical school, she rediscovered her path through going to nature, and her I think she had a midwife helping her in that intrinsic journey as well. So yeah, everything you say absolutely makes sense. We can tap back into our intuition with the assistance of nature and everything that's around us for us, not created by us. But if we can tap into that higher source of interaction and uplifting and healing, then we will be bathing in a whole different frequency of a whole different world. And I hope we can all learn how to do that in this chaotic physical realm.
Yeah, at least it's a start.
Yes.
Right? Like we're not going to finish this. It's kind of us as parents to start it and say, here's my little try at this.
Right.
And if we can listen to the true Indigenous people that are still caring for these lands, we have a lot to learn. It's time for us to listen. That includes our bodies. They know a lot. They know a lot. We're just so busy ignoring it, you know?
Yeah. Brooke, do you have anything to
No,
add?
I think that's a beautiful way to finish. And yeah, I think it's remembering we have a choice. We can decide to choose differently. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
All right,
Thank you
that
so much,
summarizes
Erinne.
it. Thank
Yeah.
you, Erinne.
Oh, thank you I got to spend an hour with two amazing women. I just so thankful. Thank you for considering that I had something to share. I appreciate having a space to do that.
Of course you do. You always do. And to our listeners, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.